GitHub had a rough week. In 7 days, a merge queue bug silently destroyed thousands of pull requests. A critical vulnerability let any authenticated user run code on GitHub servers with a single command. And one of the platform's most loyal users, someone who has opened GitHub every single day for 18 years, announced he's leaving. And all of that while the supply chain attacks we've been covering on this channel kept using GitHub as their primary delivery mechanism. This is one story, and it's one that hits close to home for anyone running their own infrastructure. So let me walk you through the week. On April 23rd, a merge queue bug silently reverted commits across 658 repositories and 2,092 pull requests. Not a slowdown, not an outage, a data integrity failure. Code that developers thought was merged? It wasn't. On April 27th, GitHub search went down for hours after the Elasticsearch backend got hammered by what GitHub is calling a likely botnet. And on April 28th, CVE 2026-3854 goes public. Any authenticated user could run code on GitHub's servers with a single git push. And at the time of disclosure, 88% of self-hosted GitHub Enterprise Server instances were still unpatched. And on the same day, Mitchell Hashimoto, GitHub user 1299, on the platform since February 2008, published a post saying Ghosty is leaving GitHub. That's 7 days, 3 major failures, and 1 very public departure. So let me tell you about Mitchell Hashimoto, because his story puts a human face on everything else in this video. He co-founded HashiCorp. He built Terraform, Vagrant, Vault, and Consul. He joined GitHub in February of 2008 as user number 1,299 and has opened it almost every single day since, over half of his life. He even coded on his honeymoon while his wife was still asleep because GitHub was where he was the happiest. And he kept a journal of GitHub outages over the past month, and almost every day had an X. A quote from him says, "I want to ship software, and it doesn't want me to ship software. I want to code, and I can't code with GitHub anymore. I'm sorry. After 18 years, I've got to go." He's open to returning if GitHub delivers real improvements, but for now, Ghosty is moving. And he's not the only one saying this. Engineers across the developer community have been logging the same pattern. One wrote publicly, "This is not a dependable platform anymore. Every day, something else is broken." So then the question is, what is GitHub saying about it? GitHub's CTO, Vlad Fedorov, published a post this week stating the new priority order is availability first, then capacity, then new features. He acknowledged the April 23rd and April 27th incidents were, quote, not acceptable. GitHub has also been without a CEO since mid-2025. Thomas Dohmke departed, and Microsoft folded GitHub into a core AI organizational unit. The current C-suite includes a CFO, a COO, a CTO, a CPO, a CRO, and a chief of staff. And the CEO seat sits empty. What GitHub has been investing in heavily is AI. Think Copilot and agentic coding tools. The CTO's availability post references a shift from a 10x capacity plan in October of 2025 to a 30x redesign in February of 2026, driven by agentic workflows producing peaks of 90 million merged PRs and 1.4 billion commits. And the problem is the core infrastructure wasn't built for that scale, and it's showing. So now let's talk about CVE 2026-3854. Wiz discovered this on March 4th and reported it to GitHub the same day. GitHub validated it within 40 minutes and patched github.com within 2 hours, and public disclosure happened on April 28th. Here's how it worked. When you run git push, your request passes through several internal GitHub services, and one of those services builds an internal header that carries security critical configuration. That header uses semicolons to separate fields. The problem is that users applied push option values were being copied directly into that header without sanitizing semicolons. An attacker could craft a push option containing a semicolon and inject extra fields into the header. And the parser used last write wins logic. The injected fields silently overrode the legitimate ones. With one single crafted git push, an attacker had root, on the server. On GitHub.com, that meant code execution on shared storage nodes with potential access to millions of private repositories across completely unrelated organizations. Luckily, though, GitHub's forensic investigation confirmed no exploitation before the disclosure. On GitHub Enterprise Server, it's a different picture. 88% of instances were still unpatched at the time of public disclosure. So if you run a self-hosted GitHub Enterprise Server, upgrade to version 3.19.3 or later immediately, and check your audit log for push operations containing semicolons in the push option values. One thing worth noting is that Wiz found this vulnerability using AI-assisted reverse engineering, specifically an MCP-based tool for automated binary analysis of GitHub's closed source binaries. GitHub called it one of the first critical vulnerabilities discovered this way. The supply chain attacks we've covered over the past few weeks have one thing in common: GitHub. The Bitward CLI attack targeted a package used by 10 million people and 50,000 businesses. The attack vector was GitHub Actions. The elementary data attack used a GitHub Actions workflow vulnerability as its entry point. A newly created user account posted a malicious script in a pull request comment, and the pipeline processed it without sanitizing the input, and malicious code ran. The Checkmarks campaign used poisoned GitHub Action workflows and OpenVSX plugins, and Team PCP used GitHub Action tags that could be silently repointed to different code. GitHub Actions is trusted infrastructure. It runs builds for millions of projects. And that trust is what makes it an attractive target. Attackers go where developers grant permissions and assume safety. The Dutch government just soft-launched a self-hosted Forgejo instance for publishing government open source software. And their stated reasoning is digital sovereignty and supply chain integrity. They classified external developer platforms as a risk because they're outside of government control. And Ghosty is leaving, and Hashimoto doesn't yet know where it's going. He's in discussion with multiple providers, commercial and open source. And the read-only GitHub mirror stays up during the transition, but active development is moving. The options being discussed publicly include Forgejo, Codeberg, GitLab, Gitea, and Sourcehut. Let me walk you through what these actually are. Forgejo is getting the most attention right now. It's a hard fork of Gitea. It's fully open source and maintained by the Codeberg nonprofit. Codeberg is a hosted Forgejo instance run as a nonprofit, and it's free for open source projects. So if you want to try Forgejo without running your own server, this is a starting point. Gitea is what Forgejo is forked from. It's lightweight and simple to set up. And if you've been following the channel for a while, you may have seen it come up before, and it's still a solid solution and widely used in home lab setups. Sourcehut is also worth knowing about. It's minimalist and email driven, and it's got a different workflow than GitHub, but it has a dedicated community. And Drew DeVault, the maintainer, is vocal about software freedom, and the project reflects that. Now, none of these is a complete drop-in replacement for GitHub. The network effects are real. Visibility, discoverability, contributor reach, those don't transfer automatically, but the core infrastructure, the Git hosting, the CI, the issue tracking is all there. GitHub is in a difficult spot right now with reliability issues that are acknowledged as unacceptable. A critical RCE that went public this week, a sustained wave of supply chain attacks running through its infrastructure, and a high-profile developer departure after 18 years on the platform. And look, GitHub isn't going away. Too much of the world depends on it, and the network effects are too strong. But this week raised real questions about what it means to depend on infrastructure that you don't control. And luckily, the alternatives exist. With Forgejo and Gitea and Codeberg, Sourcehut, they've been getting better for years, and they will continue to do so as more time goes on. As always, all of the sources are linked in the description down below, so be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious whether any of these changes affect how you think about where your code lives. And if you haven't seen the supply chain video series, I'll have those links available as well, as it's the context behind everything in today's video. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me here today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.